Good evening. Thanks for being here with us. Before we start, we're gonna make an announcement in English.
If you're looking for live translation, please click on the interpretation icon in the toolbar. There will also be captions in English if you click on the button that says Show Captions. You may have to click on the More tab for the caption option to appear.
My name is Cristina. I'm the press director of News Literacy Project. We are a nonprofit organization helping students and the public to learn how to identify sources of believable news so we can avoid misinformation. We're in an electoral year and decided how to vote. It's important. But we know that Spanish speakers in the US are at risk to exposed to false information about voting. The News Literacy Project have gathered a panel of journalists and experts to help us to learn ways to avoid misinformation during the election time and how to find believable sources of information. Our moderator for this conversation is Alba Mendiola. Alba, it's an ambassador for News Literacy Project. She was a journalist for Telemundo for 18 years and winner of many Emmy Awards. Right now, she's a bilingual teacher of journalism in Chicago. Before giving Alba the word, we're going to make an announcement in English.
Once again, if you're looking for the English translation, please click on the interpretation icon in the toolbar. There will also be captions in English if you click on the button that says Show Captions. You may have to click the More tab for the caption option to appear.
And right now, Alba, it's going to introduce the panel and start our meeting.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Cristina, and I welcome everyone here present. It's an honor for me to see and talk about this very important matter and moderate this panel of what I call one of the biggest problems that we are living nowadays and lately, which is misinformation. The goal for this panel is to help us to have the tools to help us to be able to know what are we seeing in social media. I'm a teacher now, and I tell my students that it's very important to navigate this huge sea of information, and we have to know how to swim to be able to rescue ourselves from all these problems. Now I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have a very interesting group. We have a journalist, we have experts in the matter. We have Tamoa Calzadilla. She is editor and boss of Factchequeado, and she is from the Reynold Johnson Institute, the detector platform verification of facts of Univision Noticias, and the first one raised in the US before she was informing about corruption on the Venezuelan politician and the documents of Panama Papers. We have Jesús García as well. He's the editor of La Opinión. He writes about politics, immigration, and national matters. Many of his articles have been awarded for the Asociación Nacional de Publicaciones Hispanas, and is the author of the book El Chapo, Beyond the Reasonable Doubt. Editor and collaborator of the newspapers en Reforma and El Financiero Bloomberg. Also, we have with us Elián Zidán. He's a journalist from Mexico and co-host of Noticiero Univision Evening. He was reporter and journalist of Al Despertar, Digital in Nueva York, and collaborator of Aquí y Ahora. Cristina Tardáguila, Lupa Agency, biggest initiative of verifying data in Brazil, and consultant of Democracy Institute of the Americas, Digital Democracy Institute of the Americas. She worked as a reporter, editor, and was the director of International Fact-Checking Network and senior director of international programs and Center of Journalists. As you can see, it's a big panel, very interesting panel full of experts. So we're going to try to navigate this matter. First, I want to ask Cristina, because elections are coming up and it's very important here in the US and also in some Latino American countries like in Mexico. And it's important for us to know who is the Latin voter. Cristina, is there a profile of the voter here in the US and how do we consume this news related to political advertisement and with the electoral time coming?
Hola a todos.
Good evening. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Thank you for the News Literacy Project for the invitation. And it's beautiful to be here speaking in Spanish. I'm from Brazil. So in Spanish, I'm going to say a couple mistakes here and there, and I'm so sorry beforehand, but for your question, which is extremely important. I think we have to sit a base for the conversation for tonight, and basically, investigation of EIA have taught us the obvious. Latinos, we are not an homogeneous group. We are many, many people with different backgrounds, different languages, cultures, interests, level, different economic levels. So it doesn't exist really. Then look at the middle Latino or the common Latino. And that's something that we look in the media in the United States. They speak of Latinos like we are all the same group. Or if we are like a specific person, this needs to be clear from the beginning and to guide our conversation. So all the investigations that EIA have done, in fact, when it was just a Department of Ethics Institute. So we knew that the kind of behavior from Latino changes between different nationalities, it changes between different levels of education, it changes between different stages of life where they're living, and it's a lot of misinformation on how Latino vote. In fact, detailed information by nationality, economic level, and I'm not gonna go into details because our audience can take a look at the studies of BDIA. They have many investigations on that matter, but I just want to make sure that we're not just one group. And talking about the consuming news, which is another subject, and it's gonna guide our conversation, we have to have clear, then keeping in mind our first point, then we're not just one group and we're not the same. It doesn't exist either, just one simple strategy for all of us. No, we have to have a very good thought strategy for each small group of Latinos, of the different groups of Latinos. What we do know as a very clear, in a very clear way, is that we are big consumers of social media. A percentage, according to the data that we have from BIA, consume information in YouTube every week regularly. So YouTube has a very important role in our daily basis of information. And of course, Latinos would understand here in the conference, we are huge users of WhatsApp. So WhatsApp has a very important role in our communication. 50% of Latinos say then they take their news and information from this platform, which curiously is not a news platform. It's just a message platform. And this total is 50%. And it's a bigger number than we're seeing in the other ethnias represented in the US. So I'm going to give you the word back with some data so we can continue our conversation. And yes, I've seen this WhatsApp because it's consuming Latin American in different countries more than in the United States. We came from our countries, but we're not losing contact with our people in Latin America. So I'm going to ask Tamoa. We know who Latinos, who we are and how to consume information, but what is the problem that we're seeing with the misinformation? If you can give us a few examples, and how can this affect enormously the misinformation for the political campaigns and all this momentum that we're seeing in the United States, where we're seeing more campaigns of election coming up.
Sí, gracias, Alba.
Hello to all of you and the audience. It's important what Chris said. We're not a monolithic group. We are more than 63 million in this country, at least from Latin origin. So this group matters more and more for the election. It's the first voting minority. So this is just not a regular. I think that we can live on the side. We know they have more. We have to have more interest in voting because you become citizens. But that is a way to target right there and to make sure that these people move the public opinion and afterwards they can vote when they become citizens or Latinos who are born here, because we are community, Latino communities. That's what we talk in plural. We are communities, Latino communities living within different cultures, but there is problems with the misinformation. We're very vulnerable because there is many sources of information in English, but we do not have the same amount in Spanish. So it's a lot of platforms in English of fact checking and compare with the platforms of fact checking in Spanish. So there's gaps, information gaps, and those are gaps, and we have fact check. Fact check started in April as a collaborative work with partnership with different big and small medias. 65 of us, and we not only share this work against misinformation, but we do listen to these partners in the Wichita, Kansas, New York, because realities are different. So we have things in common. Then, as an example, South Florida, where I am right now, they have a particularity with misinformation. It's the radio in Florida. They have people that all the time are speaking, giving their opinion, and it's based in misinformation. There we see around the monster, El Coco, we call him in Venezuela. So that's where the fear starts for people that we want to be very well informed, and is the fraud, huge fraud of 2020, and then have give us many doubts. I've seen last surveys from Washington Post, 36% of the surveyed people believed it was a huge fraud, and Biden did not win with the distance that he had. Although 60 courts said there was no fraud, everything looks good, and there is no way to prove it, then the fraud existed. But witnesses of that, they just retract themselves and say that. So the damage is there from misinformation, and that's our job, especially in electoral year. This electoral year is the first elections with the use of AI. And now we're seeing their use in Artificial Intelligence Act campaign. I remember a couple, DeSantis attacking Donald Trump, and what happens if Biden wins, and painting a panorama of wars, scarcity. And people are not aware of what really is real and what is not. We're ready in 2024. This is not the first elections we covered, and we want to see something misinformation narrative that we call the big lie. These are matters related to immigration, and we're seeing how immigration is becoming a campaign matter. These narratives, and we are in presence of invasion, and immigrants are coming without control, and this narrative comes with images, links, comments, audios. And we have images, videos, a truck coming through. This is how they enter migrants, and you can see trucks. And when we went and checked, it was actually a protest of truck drivers in Colombia from many years ago. So things like that help to impulse a narrative with a lie. I put the example in Florida because it illustrated well when misinformation is being unobjected for a community that is running from dictatorship, like socialists, like the ones that we come from, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua. And we're seeing how With the misinformation, we have a picture that this party and this party are associated with socialist regimes through images out of context or hoax, radio hoax, etc. And we also see, like in the shooting in Kansas City, we saw the responsible, it's illegal aliens quotes and went and checked the name of that immigrant have been used many years in different shootings. That person does not exist, but it's a way to impulse narratives with all these tools. Examples, I have many of them, but we all have to speak. And in fact, when people do not know where you can verify that data, and that is your job. Also, the audience, many people don't know what is. When we see many 24-hour cycles of news, there's certain channels 24/7 given running news, and they just put reporters under investigations, and there's also panels like what we're doing right now of opinion. And audience sometimes don't know the difference. Who is a journalist and who is a person that is actually given a personal opinion? And that's why I want to ask Elián, how do you manage news and redaction rooms and the facts? Because I'm sure you get a ton of information and you have to determine what's going to be on the air to not misinform.
Correcto. Antes que nada,
Good evening. Thank you for being here. It's important to, like we said, inform and leave misinformation behind and really explain what's going on. When it comes to how to verify information, Alba, it's based on the principles of journalism. We have to corroborate that many of these principles are in the information: who, how, why. If that's not present in a fact, we cannot tell it. If we cannot corroborate information, at least from two sources, that in fact that this fact happened, we will not be able to tell it. Journalist basic is to have the information before getting there, and that's the difference in between being a serious media network or an influencer, then because of sensationalism and to seek that reaction is posting something. And that's something that we're talking briefly. Tamoa mentioned sometimes this type of content appeal to the human feeling, and when we see a reaction, and in fact immigration, then we were talking, there are many different matters like abortion, segregations at schools, and any subject that it's important to certain target of people. And we have the control of algorithms. We have to send this information to a specific region or area, perhaps South Florida or Chicago, or we can send it to a specific region or even a country. So we have to put in context what's happening with information. We're getting information like being part of the internet from all over the world. We've seen this with wars. With this bellic conflicts, the first images in social media are things from the past. They're not, those are facts that do not correlate with the moment. And we have to start teaching people. It's our responsibility as navigators of the internet, not as that person watching TV that knows what TV is saying is the reality, but we have to fact check one and twice. When we have access to a phone and literally we become the director of your own channel, of your own telephone, and we become and as just to a person to spread the news. So we have to be careful because we gotta think, I saw this on TV, read in the news. Have I looked this on the internet? Do I get this information? Well, it's important if you don't see that to put a pause, stop spreading those news. At the beginning, we are hearing that we're getting from WhatsApp, this massive change that the aunt, grandma got and sent to us. They're sensationalist information, and and wrong information, and that's how we get misinformation. When we stop spreading that content, there is a block right there on us. It is a block with that purpose, which was to um, unbalance. So that was the propaganda of German Nazi and the Cuban Revolution. It was sent them. It was to send a message to create a reaction on their people. And many times, unfortunately, when we say a lie 5, 6, 7 times, many people believe it's a truth and they believe it. Of course, in fact, talking about some investigation to my students, I found them from the health organization. We got this term, then it was just mentioned this virus, then it's running from news. Then they're not truth. And you mentioned something very important, Elián. We do not stop having that relationship with our parents in our Latin American countries. And that's why I want to ask Jesus, in Mexico, you're having elections in June, and Mexicans here in the United States have the right to vote. So how important is not to be misinformed and to make the right decision, a decision well informed and educated?
Muchas gracias.
Thank you
Gracias
very
a todos.
much to all of you and good evening. Very interesting. This, what Christina's commenting, diversity of the people, Latin people. It's very important. Just on this panel, we're seeing people from Brazil, Venezuela, Mexico, and our redactions. We have people from Dominican Republic, Argentina, Spain, and that is the Latin population. And we have the United States. That's why the message and the way we send it is important. Before I answer concretely what you're asking, I want to share one of the surveys that we did as part of the opinion. People that consume a lot of social media are starting to have some consciency, some majority of the information that they consume on social media, it's high, and they admitted it, and that's a good thing. So we're seeing an awakening on that fact, and it's extremely important. Like this debate that we're having and this analysis that we are giving people. So are you were talking about the voters in Mexico happens to in different countries and can participate in their own countries, Ecuador, Colombia, etc., because they're citizens with double civic responsibilities. And many of them can vote in the United States, but they can also vote in their countries. Unfortunately, the information that we got specifically from Mexico not always gets at the right time or is the best information. We have to remember that Mexico have many migrants in the United States and they can vote, but there is misinformation on how they can ask or renew their new ID card. It's a process that is very complicated. So they have to do many different register. So I have to go to the consulate and sign and get my ID and register for voting, which is due February 25th. And now I myself, that is connected with information, considered it actually just that annoying. And that's what happens to people. Can you imagine with somebody working 2 jobs? It's very difficult to do that. And we add the misinformation, so it gets way more complicated. Many local medias don't speak just directly to Mexicans, but we also make a big effort. But we also have the Diario Nueva York, which due to diversity, we don't have the same focus that we can have with their opinion. And that is extremely important to keep in mind. Also, right now, the effort that we're doing, and Elián was talking as journalists, is to post verified information or have done everything clear then because of the promptitude or the fast or the quickness, because he works in TV, but many of us work in digital versions or printed versions, and we work it differently. So we have to make sure what state of information is that information. Shooting, for instance, we can say that is 20 people dead because somebody mentioned that, but no, we have to find the correct way to report that information, and that's the job. As journalists, we have to do in a constant way. Thank you very much. And because if we're not informed, we're going to be transmitting misinformation. So now we're going to talk about the language. Perhaps we're very different from many different countries, and our food can be different. Traditions can be different. But what unites us is the language. How Spanish comes to play when it comes to misinformation, or when we see in the news things that are not truth. Hispanics here, there is some more than speak more English than Spanish, and now we start seeing Spanglish almost recognize many words that have been changing. But again, Cristina, how language play a role for misinformation? Good question, Alba. And that's something that it comes from studying. There is a lack of academic results of surveys, in fact, and how Latino prefers to receive their communication. That's something that's starting to happen. We have to make sure that we're clear that Latinos feel or want to make an effort to be part of the community of Americans, of the group of, we don't like Latinos to be put as a community on the side of society. So what we see on data is Latinos, we do understand the English and we can perfectly communicate in English. When generations of migrants are getting stable, the language gets better. So mistake it's being made by the ones. Then if you want to make a Latino to understand you, you have to talk to a Latino in Spanish. No, that's not based on any data. We can understand the English, so that's a doubt that it's been clear. But now we talk about Spanglish, that weird mix of two languages, or we just keep everything in English. Right now we have the component of each of us. We have to know exactly with which Latino you want to speak. And what we can lack of any type of communication to battle misinformation is the cultural ingredient. BBA studies says that you can perfectly explain a Latin person in English what is the meaning of fear, of wondering, to spread fear and convince them something it's happening or can't be done. And when we explain this, for instance, we have to illustrate it with Latino realities, not American realities. So in order for the communication to be successful among Latinos, it could be in English, could be in Spanglish, but it has to have the cultural ingredient where Latino can be identified. So now I want to talk about something that we all agree, Tamoa mentioned it, lack of quality information and media then talks directly to Latinos to battle misinformation. If I'm not mistaken, it's more than 12 fact checks there in English and 3 of them in Spanish. So any kind of contact at this moment, it's going to be good and needed. Now, something else that is connected, and Eliana mentioned it before, is that, sorry, it wasn't Eliana, it was Jesus. So the investigations said that Latinos know that misinformation exists. We're not dumb. We're not misinformed about misinformation. We do know that we have that problem We do know that it's a big problem and it has an impact. What is hard for us is to know what's real and what is false. And that is a reality, not only for Latinos, but from anywhere in the world. It's still difficult. And like Tamoa mentioned, knowing if somebody's true or false is even hard for all of us today. So, two important facts that we can add to this conversation is I'm going to use this word in Spanish, there is a bulo, which is another false information, and we hear or see in the news, in the US news, and is the Latino that consume or believe information is the one with low level of education. That is false. Studies from BBIA based in interviews with more than 2,400 Latino adults in the United States give us very clear that Latinos that believe in misinformation are the ones and they consume a lot of information that are polarized. It doesn't have to be related with the nationality or education level. But if we want to talk to Latinos that are believing in misinformation, we have to keep in mind that, of course, they're getting the information from YouTube and WhatsApp, and they're diverse, they understand English, but they also are consuming a lot of media and information that are ultra partisan. So that is the importance of the education and literacy to know what's true and what's false. And Tamoa, you can talk about that because you have that program of everything that you do and it's related to teachers. When it's truth and when is not. And tell us a little bit, when do you try to teach this and give us an examples? Factchequeado.com is the page, and we verify post verifications. If we see something we got for labels as false, no context is false, or is truth, which is important to tell people. This is truth because we generate trust, and it's not everything in the world is a lie. I have to know when it's truth and when it's false. And we also explained before, then it's debunking or just have a step forward of narratives that are going to be, they're going to create damage. So in factcheck.com, we have about 30 different matters, which is like with all this complex electoral system we have in the United States, and what is a delegate convention, primaries, caucuses, and explains all that and what is false, that it was fraud in 2020, why migrants undocumented or with green can vote, many different things that look very simple, but they are sowing seeds on people, and this is the procedure, this is what we need to do, these are the sources, so I can go after and check the results, or why my ballot is like this, or why on the mail, if it's doable to go do it as a regular way, then it's part of the history in this country. So we all have arroba fact checked in all our accounts, and our 365 partners can publish everything for free in their own media. So what we do, amplify, and we only go where the fact check can get. So they post it, and we have bigger audience. So every Thursday in the coffee of our partners, they let us know what's happening and what do we need to say. Many times we get it through WhatsApp. We have a chat box. So we all can get a question, or is this truth? Is this false? And we can also feel what kind of narratives are going around from the partners or the chat box. So for instance, if there is an audio saying Biden government just signed a law to give health insurance for free to the ones that earn less than 50,000. And we know that with artificial intelligence, they can have a very similar voice of Biden saying that we're signing this and we see images and where we are investigating. It was actually a different president signing something else different, but many people on Facebook are asking, well, what do I do? I earned less than 50,000. I want different insurance. This happens a lot. We have our own monitor checked, and our partners always let us know what's going on. Asking the checkbook, automatically we can investigate with our team with our own methodology and follow principles of international fact checking network. That's what Cristina was the director. We have a methodology, then ask sources and bring data and connect with links so people can also verify that information. That way, in every news, we can tell people how you can check those news. Sometimes people feel overwhelmed with something and say, this is impossible. How can I know that this is true or not? It's not impossible. Couple steps, then you just have to take. Trusting Google as a partner and load an image. One of our partners sitting here, it was from a different earthquake or an event, and it wasn't here, an event from a long time ago. It's just a simple look, search in Google. It's just a simple attitude of doubting. And this question mark or interrogation marks are not very similar to the company that I know. If it's something from the government, it's .gov or not .com, .net. There are many different things that I like to say. We don't have to feel scared by artificial intelligence. Many of the things that we discover that are false, we can detect it with the most minimum waste of checking of any human being, or with just quick abilities that we journalists have. Call the source, check with them, call and check with social media of that person, or well, with Twitter we have this problem because it's not as easy to trust in the blue check mark, but in different ones, it's doable to see if that person really said something. Just don't panic. Just think twice before you share anything. Do a briefly check something that creates a lot of emotions, anger or happiness. I just bought the lottery. No, most likely something's wrong with this if it gives us all these emotions, overwhelming emotions, either angry or happiness. We're learning, we're training in news literacy, how to check in Google and how to look for something in Twitter and what to do not to fall into all this fake news. And this is all part of the work that we're doing in fact check. Not only to tell you that it's false, but how we got there. I also want to add that all starts at schools. I'm at school, I'm a teacher of a journalist for the high school students here in Illinois. 2 years ago, they started a law where public schools must have a unit of media literacy in one of their classes, and it does not have to be in an English class. It could be in Spanish, it could be in math. How algorithms work in science, how the weather works, how there's many different ways to give this information, and news literacy project have a lot of resources and that I personally have used. And if any other teachers are seeing us, just go to the page, News Literacy Project, those Sunday nights, and you're thinking, what am I going to be teaching this week? If it's coming from media literacy, it's right there. Many other resources you can find. But I want to talk to Elián. Elections are coming up, and now we talked about it, the importance, because sometimes we talk about misinformation, but we also the not knowing how the electoral system of the United States works, or who is my major or my representative, and especially in small local elections, who's my council member, and how do you inform people so they can make their right decisions? The most important part is never to tell people how they have to react to an information, who do you have to vote, or how they have to think. It's their own, it's our own choice. When it comes to politics, it's important not to have an affiliation to any parties. We have to be neutral. Information, it's the information it is. If the Republican information came from the Republic or Democrat side, we have to inform. If it happens in Mexico, we have to inform it. What happens with New York Times, did the president like it or not? It's a fact, and we have to inform. We can't take a side. When it comes to the election, it's complicated because there is a lot of people who do not know the small elections. They know the generals elections once every 40 years in November in the United States, but when it comes to what is a mid-term election, because actually they are extremely important. Those are the ones that apply to the daily living of the taxpayer, that senator, that council member is the one who's going to be making decisions for you, for your community, your neighborhood, and your day-to-day. And when it comes to small elections, we have to inform the vitality and the importance of these elections. And they are as important as the general elections. And when it comes to information, what Tamoa said and what we have heard from Cristina and Jesus, we have to doubt. So many times we have to doubt what we see in different digital platforms. If it was not in a place, then we know that that information was verified when they're telling us that in fact it's missing context, like the detector then since 2016 that make our eyes opening of the unknown. It was misinformation, and it was vital during COVID-19 pandemic, where we didn't know what was happening with vaccination, with deaths, what was happening, and all these resources like WhatsApp chatbots. Univision also have them make us as a news agency open our eyes and to what it's people asking, what is the community interest that many times we can take for granted, or we can assume that they know that information and perhaps they don't. We don't have much time left, but I want to talk about that. What's your opinion? How do you check that information is real and that people are getting all that needed information to make their best decision when they're going to vote? We can't hear you. I'm sorry, I muted myself to not make noises, but much of the information that we're receiving and what is developing, like Elián said, we have to verify twice if it's possible. Where does that information come from before we launch it? There are different processes in posting information, especially in real time. Then let us explain people. In what state is that information? First reports, police reports, but also to cite a trust source. If it's the police, for instance, YPD is informing a shooting, to cite exactly what YPD is saying, not to add additional information, etc., while we are doing the investigation number, because it's something developing. Now it's extremely important to keep in mind what other media sources are saying. If they're saying somebody died and it's not verified, it's third parties. If it's not confirmed or verified by a family member or an agency to represent it, you can't just say that somebody died. Now, Elián mentioned the New York Times case, which is a very polemic matter. I've been really busy with that matter. There are parts of the New York Times that it was not explained, and I have to verify with the White House and the Department of Justice that Justice and somehow have to confirm, but it took me the whole entire day. But we have to close that circle that it was missing as a part of the process. So journalists, we have different stages and techniques that we have to apply to continue keeping this trust from the people. And as a journalist, we cannot lie to people. And if something we say by mistake, because at the end of the day, we're human beings and we said something incorrect information, if you're posting it online, you have to say then for instance, this information that we post before it's incorrect, and explain to people. That's what we call it also. When you cite something wrong, you have to post then you cited wrong. That's called transparency. And it helps us to keep the trust of the people. And that's what we have to look media. Media, we have to continue keeping that trust and not to trust only reports in TikTok or other social media. While TikTok now, particularly, it's for the younger generation, is what's being reported in new investigations and as a part of their doing. In Michael, which is part of the company that the opinion belongs in TikTok, it's a source of information for the young. So it's extremely important. How do we get to them? And in the use of English is very interesting. Spanglish is growing. And we verified that in our recent survey from MyCode. And it shows that the percentage of people, it's close to Spanglish, but they still liked announces in Spanish. Latinos are population are so diverse. Many of you pointed not too long ago, Alba Cristina mentioned and speaking in English and Spanish and Spanglish, which is wonderful. So that helps us as a journalist, as a verifiers, to make it easier to how these people can find this information. And we can spend an hour in all this, but we're running out of time. And I'm going to give you a quick second for you to tell us something else and you want to add about this matter, and especially to reach the goal and the objective, to people know where to find information, real information. And if it's not, what can I do with it? Or what can I do to verify it? Cristina, you go first. Thank you. And I don't know if I have another round, but thank you very much for everybody that is listening, and the organizers, you, my partners. I want to finish with two very objective things that I have to say. First of all, think about the continent. We have to think about what's happening in the whole entire America. So we're very, very in deep, like for instance, what happened in Argentina, misinformation also with El Salvador elections. So we are very in that misinformation of what's happening in elections in Mexico. And we have no doubt that these three events, what we have learned in these three events, it's going to be seen in the United States, because the connection within the communities here in the US and who left in the country, it's very intense. So BDIA, we have a very noble content to see what's trending in misinformation in this country. So we as journalists or audience or educators can be ready, so it doesn't shock us when it comes to the election of the United States. And to also wanted to add something. We're doing a social listening. Of what's up, then it's nothing handmade. We have extremely interesting tools, and they're monitoring what is saying basically real time in almost 1,000 groups. So whomever have interest in what's going on in WhatsApp, which is very hard to investigate because of cryptography and so forth, we have a lot of material of what's going on in real conversations with Latinos, then use the American code +1 to use WhatsApp. And we know that all that information, we can get that from any data who's in those groups. So we're only focusing on text, videos, audios of what they're sharing. And we promise to get a lot of information and knowledge from this type of investigation. So whomever is interested in WhatsApp, you can you can go to BDIA. 30 seconds, Tamoa, if you give us your last comment. Thank you very much. It has been extremely interesting being here. I have nothing else to say, but we are working with a collaborative work and partnerships, including you, and you. We all have been partners at some point, and we can collaborate with many different points. Sending something in WhatsApp that is being misinformed, and we can make a warning. And you can follow us in @Factchequeado and just keep an eye on everything, because radicalization, polarization, increases misinformation, and we are in a polarization year 2024. Let's just not be deceived. That's what we're here for. Elián, thank you very much for all of you. The opportunity is a pleasure to be here. In fact, the message is to have a doubt everything you see in social media and confirm yourself. Be that change agent to avoid misinformation. You have the power to stop transmitting those messages. And on the name of Univision, thank you for the trust that you have on us for many years to be that media in Spanish to bring you that safetyness and security of the right information that we have. We do it in social media and TV, and the digital department that Tamoa knows and makes wonders to avoid this news. Then they're trying to unbalance the reality, and we have many tools then we have to avoid misinformation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tamoa, Alba, Cristina, Elián. Very interesting, and I want to see a report of what you guys are doing. And also to mention, then we have a new effort this year with a mini portal with the election of the United States, and we're getting new tools, in fact, to be able to cut that gap or close that gap of misinformation, because the only thing that we can do as journalists is to post and verify things, and the effort that Tamoa Zoom with her team is just to add more with her in our partnership with that podcast, and she's part of it to verify information. So people they have to trust what Elián is doing with the team in Televisa, Univision. We are verified media, trustworthy media. We have worked for many years with experience. And of course, if you see something that you consider is not correct, you can write back to us. Our channels are open, and you can receive an answer so that information can be confirmed, be reconfirmed, and just to point if there is an error or not. Thank you very much to all of you and the panelists, especially to all of you who have been with us here listening. This recommendation from the experts in social media. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much, and I hope this information was good for you. Good night to everyone.